Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge YouTube channel and to this monster preview of Paris-Nice 2021. You'll remember that Paris-Nice was the last stage race last year to be held before the world was turned upside down. I think even a few teams didn't participate, but it's back this year with an interesting and pretty balanced parcours. To contend for the general classification, a rider must be solid in a flat ITT, good at punchy finishes and medium mountain stages, can't lose time in some of these tricky sprint stages. They've got a pure mountaintop finish. Now I'll have highlight videos of every single stage of Paris-Nice uploaded on the channel before the start of the next stage. When you will wake up in Europe, it'll be uploaded. I'll upload them quicker once I move to Europe this year. But there'll be podcast recaps on the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. They're usually uploaded within 90 minutes to the stage conclusion on the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast YouTube channel and on podcast players. And if you want to discuss the race in real time, you can support the channel and join the members Discord through YouTube channel membership below. Now this, I never made a video quite like this before. It's going to be quite detailed and consequently pretty long, but I know that most of you are just built different and want this info. We'll take a look at the start list, dive into each of the stage profiles, discuss how we think the stage is going to play out, and then how I think GC will play out as well in the race. There are timestamps for the video as well, so you can come back to it next week when you want a refresher on what each stage looks like. But let's go to the start list first. I'm using the start list from procyclingstats.com as at Friday the 5th of March in the morning European time. It just got refreshed with what looks like the full teams as I'm preparing this, and the main GC contender is pretty obvious. Primoz Roglic riding Paris-Nice for the first time. He's typically raced at Tirreno Adriatico or Catalunya in the past. Last year's winner, Maximilian Schachmann, is eschewing Strada Bianca, where he would have been a probably podium favourite to come and defend his title. And also two-time winner Richie Porte is here, the Ineos Grenadiers' most complete general classification rider and who they should ride for in the Tour de France this year. But the GC field is not so deep. Roglic is the clear favourite, but the sprinters field is super deep. Got a quality crop of sprinters on the start list. Sam Bennett tearing up the UAE last week. Mads Pedersen just won Kuurne-Brussel-Kuurne. Arnaud Demare, obviously dominant last year. Ackermann and Nizzolo won a stage here last year, as well as Pascal Ackermann. But let's dive into this route. Stage 1, I think, is actually the most complicated route, or stage to predict rather. It's a rolling 166 kilometre stage doing 2 laps anti-clockwise south of the start and finish in Saint-Cyr-le-Col. Now I've checked the weather forecasts and there doesn't appear to be strong wind or rain predicted for this stage this Sunday. It's a Britannia Classic light style course, constant short climbs of like 700 metres at 7% gradient or 1.5 kilometres at 4.5% gradient. The final kilometre is uphill, not particularly steep. First 500 metres is false flat, 1 to 2%. And then the final 500 metres is at 4% gradient. Now, I think this should be a pretty interesting stage where things won't come that easy to Sam Bennett. He'll probably be the favourite in the betting markets, which I won't be getting around. He's clearly the best pure sprinter in a big bunch sprint in this race, based on what we saw at UAE and last year. Clear. But this isn't a simple stage. An overview of some of the sprinters and who I think are the contenders for this stage. If Demare brings his Tour de Wallonie, Giro and French national champs form of last year to this Paris-Nice, then I think he should be the favourite for this stage. Wallonie stage 4 that he won ahead of the Belgian Classics boys, Van Avermaet and Gilbert, was a harder stage and a harder finish than this. And his French national champs performance against Alaphilippe and Coquard, that was a grueling, longer course, an extra, I think, 60, 70 Ks. That performance speaks for itself. He did have good legs in Provence stage 1 and was only beaten by Ballerini, who subsequently franked that form, given how he performed at Omloop, as well as Demare. He said before Tour de la Provence, Demare, that he was a bit unwell. So I'm giving him a little bit of a pass on Provence. And if he does bring that form, and in case he does, if I was Quickstep, I would hedge my bets on this stage and send Cavagna on one of the later climbs, perhaps the last rise with 8 kilometres to go on the stage. They tried something similar in the Vuelta last year on stage 10 when they weren't 100% confident in Bennett for the finish into Suarez, even though I think he was the favourite for that stage. And that stage was a bit harder than the finish here. And if they send Cavagna Quickstep, even with him up the road, they'll still have a full train of Mercus, Seneschal and Lampard. And that will put a lot of pressure on the other lead-out trains to chase late into this stage. This tactic was key in Tour de la Provence stage 1, where Alaphilippe, being up the road, compelled FDJ's train to chase late. It weakened their train, burning matches, and consequently Demare was dropped off too early and Ballerini swooped in for the win. This stage also reminds you of another stage from the Vuelta last year, stage 15, to Sanabria that was won by Jasper Philipsen ahead of Ackermann and co. It was reasonably flat for the first 500 metres of the last K, but it kicked up in the last 500 metres, and he's smaller than those other sprinters. I think weighs a little bit less, and this finish should really suit Jasper Philipsen. My only concern is I don't really understand the move from UAE to Alpecin Phoenix. I've said this on the podcast. It's puzzling to me. If he was on UAE, I think he'd be getting a better lead out from Trentin and Christoph. I think they'd ride for him, as well as probably getting paid more. So I'm not sure what to expect from Philipsen. Neither the stage or the finish are probably difficult enough for Michael Matthews unless Bike Exchange 100% commits to making the entire stage and every climb difficult. They do have the team to do so with Durbridge, Grøndal Jansen and Edmondson. It would make sense for Trek actually and UAE to join forces with them to make the race difficult. Their sprinters, Christoph and Pedersen, classics guys who also should be considered for this stage. They prefer sprinting against a tired Bennett and Ackermann rather than the fresh versions. So I think they should try and make it difficult early too. Onto stage 2, which unlike stage 1 will almost definitely be a bunch sprint. No climbs of note at all in the last 100 kilometres. 2 flat intermediate sprints. No strong winds or rain forecasted for Monday. That doesn't necessarily mean that the finish is straightforward. The last 2 kilometres are very technical with 2 150-degree right-hand turns, the last of which is at 300 metres to go, so positioning in the finale will be crucial. If you're out of position for the final corner, you can't win this sprint. Based on his performance at the UAE Tour, Bennett, the lead-out quick-steps brought, stacked lead-out, he's got to be the favourite. I trust Mercu to guide him into good position, and also the fact that Bennett is quicker than everybody else here in a drag race. However, a couple of interesting things might happen because of these corners late. If Quickstep are in good position and are dominating the front with Seneschal, second last lead-out man, leading through the last corner with Mercu and Bennett behind him, it wouldn't surprise me if Mercu, who's obviously 5,000 IQ, lets Seneschal's wheel go, because Seneschal can sprint in his own right. It also wouldn't surprise me if someone like Philipsen or Buani tried to launch early from this last right-hand corner to try and catch FDJ or Quickstep napping. This did happen to Bennett and Demare last year in Vuelta a Burgos Stage 2 to Villadiego when Gaviria railed the last right-hand corner and beat them easily actually. Philipsen also tried this to pretty good effect out of the last left-hander in Stage 4 of the Vuelta last year to Ejea de los Caballeros. Bennett still beat him though, but it was a good move and he did nearly win. Stage 3 is the all-important individual time trial, earlier and flatter than in previous years, 14 k's long and with only 102 metres elevation gain. This is a big chance for time trial specialists like Dennis and Campenaerts to take out a short World Tour level ITT victory given the absence of Filippo Ganna. Søren Kragh Andersen won the ITT at Paris last year, just 6 seconds ahead of Schachmann on a 15k course, but that 15k course had an extra 120 metres elevation gain than this year. So Kragh Andersen should come, I think, top 3 or top 4 again. Bissegger's here as well, who I think will come top 3. This course suits both of those guys. And Bissegger came second behind Ganna in the UAE, much closer to Ganna than people expected the other week on a flat, I think 13 to 14k ITT. But I think Dennis is going to take his first win for Ineos in this individual time trial. He showed at Tour des Alpes Maritime du Var that he's got good legs already during domestique duties there. And he's still a top-shelf time trialist. Campenaerts showed in the Milano ITT last year, the last stage of the Giro, that he can also perform well still on this type of course. So anything less than a podium spot on this stage I think will be very disappointing for either Campenaerts or Dennis. But the most interesting part of this ITT for me will be the order of the GC contenders. Schachmann was able to put over 40 seconds into GC rivals Igita and Nibali in the ITT last year, building a buffer against them before the mountaintop finish to Val de Blore La Colmienne on stage 6. But you're probably thinking, can Schachmann gain time on Roglic on this stage? I don't think so. He's become a very good time trial rider, Schachmann, but I think he prefers a slower course than this one. He came second last year. They averaged below 50 k's an hour. He won the Basque Country ITT in 2019. They averaged 39 k's an hour. And despite the 300-metre punch up a 10% climb in the second kilometre and the uphill last few hundred metres, they should average well over 50 k's an hour in this ITT. And I think this stage is where Roglic is going to show why he is so good. He might not be massively better than Porte, Gegenhardt, Schachmann in flat time trials like he would have been in 2018, but I still think he's going to put time into them here. And that's why he is such a short favourite for the general classification, because gaining time here before the mountains and the medium mountains sets up the race perfectly for him to ride defensively with the strong team he has. And even in the Planche de Belfi ITT in the Tour de France, the infamous one last year, he was still quicker than Porte on the flat section despite wearing that fucked helmet. Stage 4 is where we hit the mountains for the first time. Medium mountain stage with 3,500 meters climbing and 188 Ks. Constant up and down, 6 category 2 climbs, and finishing with 7.4 kilometers, 6% average gradient in the climb to Cherouble. Both intermediate sprints are at the end of climbs. Suits Schachmann and Roglic, you have to say, with the last one being just 3.5 Ks from the finish, halfway up the final climb after 1,200 meters climbing at 10% gradient. Quite an unusual placement for an intermediate sprint and 3 bonus seconds. This stage might be difficult to control for Jumbo-Visma, particularly if riders like Haig, Schachmann, Guillaume Martin, Dylan Teuns, Tadej Bennett, Godou, Barguil are aggressive early, which I think they have to be. This is the stage where they should try and blow this race up on the earlier climbs and form a very strong group. And I think because they might have lost time in the time trial in the stage before, they'll come to that realization that they need to gain time before they get to the mountaintop finish up Le Colmier later on stage 7. Also the fact that other GC contenders can't ride a passive stage here and wait for the final climb, because it suits Roglic, who I think should be the favourite for this stage, and I think will likely take out the stage win. Jumbo-Visma train, 18 25-minute climb up Cherouble. No Pogačar, Alaphilippe or Prime Valverde here. I think if all goes to plan and there's no break and the group are together at the base, Roglic will smoke the other GC contenders at the end of this climb. Look at Ancien Millet, stage 4 on the Tour de France last year, for example. Stage 5 is a classic transition sprint stage, 203 Ks of mostly flat from Vienne to Bolène, avoiding all the mountains surrounding the Lyon area actually and heading straight south towards the sun. Given that no one named Julien Alaphilippe is present on the start line and it's a non-technical last 5 kilometers, this should come down to a bunch sprint again. I don't think there's crosswinds predicted either, and this final hill is not particularly threatening and it crests with 16 Ks remaining on the stage. So FDJ with Demare, Quickstep for Bennett and Bora for Ackermann, those trains will likely be shutting things down for their sprinters. I'd be surprised if Quickstep sent Cavagna on one of those last hills to force the other sprinters' teams to chase, given that Bennett should clearly be the favourite for this finish, but you never know. All the other sprinters that I mentioned with regard to stage 2 will also be contenders for the same reasons for that stage. Stage 6 is a beautifully balanced medium mountain stage from Brignoles to Biot with 5 categorised climbs and several others that would be categorised if they were in other stages. Just like on stage 4, this provides many opportunities for GC longshots like Haig, Godou, Bennett, Martin, etc. to attack Jumbo-Visma, and for a strong break to form, they may have riders like Joni Zagirre, Han van Ocke, Nielsen Paulus, very strong in the UAE Tour, Thomas de Gent and Bob Jungels. They're the sort of names I might expect to be in a breakaway if they've lost enough time. That's the issue though, they might not have lost enough time to Roglic and Ineos leaders, and so they might not be given much of a leash to go for this stage. This stage I think will be too difficult for Sam Bennett, so I'd expect Quickstep to try and get Remy Cavagna and Cataneo into any breakaway where they will be very dangerous on this sort of route. And if a breakaway isn't successful, then this has to be the stage that Michael Matthews has circled as his main target for the week. 2 kilometers at 5.3% average gradient for the finale, with over 3,000 meters climbing beforehand, suits him down to the ground, should remove Demare, Ackermann, Bennett from contention, and he showed last year in Milano Sanremo and Tirreno Adriatico that he's climbing perhaps better than he ever has. And I think this stage will play out similarly to the 2 Catalunya stages that he won in 2019. Roglic, of course, is a top contender for the stage win, just like in Swanson's in the Vuelta last year, where people thought the sprinters might have had a chance and Roglic dusted everybody, as well as obviously Schachmann, Magnus Cort, Colbrelli, Dylan Teuns maybe. Now the big one, stage 7, the one true mountaintop finish of this year's Paris-Nice from Nice to Val de Blois, La Colmier, nearly 4,000 meters elevation is gained in 164 Ks. Problem is the early climbs are moderate gradient lasting 20 to 30 minutes, and the crest of the last Cat 2 is over 50 kilometers before the start of the final climb, which is 16 Ks long at 6% gradient. It will not be possible to attack Jumbo-Visma or Ineos on those early climbs. Martin or Dennis, either one, they'll just mow you down in the rolling valley before the final climb. So those early climbs exist solely for a break to form and to add fatigue. But regardless, expect to see one of Ineos or Jumbo-Visma light up this final climb, depending on who's not wearing the leader's jersey. They've brought the teams that are capable of doing just that. If someone like Schachmann or Haig are in the leader's jersey because of aggression in stages 4 or 6, then both Ineos and Jumbo-Visma will probably set pace. If Roglic is wearing the leader's jersey at this point, which is expected, Ineos' best chance of winning this race is to have kept both Richie Porte and Gegenhardt as close as possible to Roglic on GC, unleash Dennis on the final climb, which is a fairly regular gradient with no sustained steep pinches, and then try and work over Roglic with attacks from Gegenhardt and Porte. With Jumbo-Visma bringing Uman, Kruijswijk and Bennett, I think it'll be pretty difficult to make a sustained difference on such a climb where a draft is important and Roglic is so strong. If he's not in yellow at this point, but very close on GC, then Jumbo-Visma, I mean, even if he is in the leader's jersey, honestly, they're probably going to drive a pretty hard pace for the entire climb, drop him off with 500 metres to go, like stage 2 of the Dauphiné last year up Col de Porte, where he destroyed everybody. But that's a long way of saying Roglic should be the favourite for the stage win on this stage. He's been dominating stages like this for the last couple of years, at least until Pogačar arrived, and he's not in this race, so I think Jumbo-Visma will ride hard enough that they can preclude attacks from stage win hopefuls like Vlasov, who'll be behind on GC, Paulus and Harm van Hoeke. Now the last stage, stage 8, classic sub 3 hour stage, doing a loop starting and finishing in Nice, 111 kilometers, medium mountain stage with 5 extended climbs from 15 to 25 minutes in length and 2 intermediate sprints in the last hour with 6 total seconds up for grabs as well as 10 seconds on the line, obviously. This stage is not a formality. It can be explosive and it can really affect a general classification. It was cancelled last year. In 2019, nothing too much happened on GC. Bernal maintained his lead on GC, winning Paris-Nice. But in 2018, Soler moved up from 6th to 1st on this final stage. He got into a break and gained 35 seconds on Simon Yates, who lost the jersey by just 4 seconds on the final day. Now, how this stage pans out obviously depends on who's in the leader's jersey at this point, how the 7 preceding stages have gone. Obviously, there'll be crashes and fatigue. It's supposed to be pretty cold, but it could be a pretty difficult stage to control by the incumbent leader. If there's no GC action and they let a break go, then I expect riders like Jonas Aguirre, who won the stage in 2019 when that very thing happened, to be in a breakaway as well as turns. Haig, if he's lost a lot of time, Tej Benoot, Jorgensen, Paulus, or Bob Jungels. But that was a detailed look at all the stages. You can see that this Paris-Nice parcours is pretty balanced. 2 bunch sprints at least on the cards, a stage or 2 for the puncher, a pure mountaintop finish, and a short medium mountain stage to finish it off for the breakaway candidates. But to wrap things up, let's review how I think GC will play out and the rationale for Roglic's heavy favouritism in the betting markets to win GC. You've got to remember that Roglic has been the best one-week racer in the world in the last couple of years by a significant margin. He's the complete package, strength in ITT, reduced bunch sprints on the flat, pure climbs, punchy uphill finishes, where he's been the best in the world. And obviously issues with third week fatigue are not a factor in a one-week stage race. Now maybe if it's super cold, it might affect his recovery. Who knows? I'm not expecting that to be a problem, but the reason he's $1.70 in the markets, and I think even that is good value, is that the team around him as well is really strong, and the GC contender pool is not particularly deep. Porte is the most realistic threat, in my view, twice the former winner of this race and also very well-rounded like Roglic. He just doesn't have that extreme strength in the uphill sprints, and he's slightly less strong in a flat ITT. The second in the betting, Schachmann, I think, will not gain any time in the ITT on Roglic. I think he'll struggle with a higher level climbing performance that I expect on stage 7 compared to last year. Regarding the sprinters, it looks like much more of a lottery to me than the GC. It's a really deep sprinters field, and depending on how hard the stages are, you've got contenders for sort of if the stage is very hard with wind or rain, etc. You've got people like Kristoff and Pedersen, or if the hills are harder than we think, Colbrelli and Matthews. But you've also got Ackermann and Nizzolo, Sam Bennett and Pascal Ackermann here, as well as Jasper Philipsen, who I really rate. So other than Bennett probably taking at least one stage win, I don't have a firm view on who's going to come out on top in the sprints in this Paris-Nice. But if you want to catch my recap of every stage of Paris-Nice next week, they'll be uploaded on the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast YouTube channel and podcast players shortly after the stage. I'll also be uploading daily highlight videos of each stage, usually when you wake up in Europe before the next stage starts. And if you've enjoyed this preview, something a little bit different and a beast of a preview, I enjoyed compiling all this info and collecting my thoughts. If you did enjoy it, make sure to let me know in the comments down below or to like the video or share it with someone who's asking about how Paris-Nice will play out next week. That'll let me know whether to make something similar for Catalunya. But I hope you're well. I'm G'd up for the racing coming up. Ciao.